Hello everyone, Luke here, and what can I say? We are doing a review on the day the chapter came out. I know, very rare of me to do this, but I figured that since obviously I've come home from work, I'm still in my work top and everything, and I thought, like, look, might as well just get it out of the way, because this chapter, whoa, some quite gruesome stuff actually happens here, and it's very interesting how we just get a chance to focus entirely on the demons. We don't go away to find out what's going on with Emma, Dawn, Gilda, Ray, or any of the others. Well, that's not exactly true. We do cut away to Norman very briefly, but aside from that, it's just a chapter focusing on demons, focusing on Giren and how he came to be the way he needs to be. But we'll just get into that when we get into the review. And I've just got a few things to say before we get into it. Is that next week there'll be no chapter, because working throughout the whole of next week, and on Friday when the chapters come out, I'm going away. I'm going to a water park. I'm going to be having the time of my life, so I'll be doing that. And the week after that, there'll be hopefully the chapter will be done before the chapter after that comes out, and we'll be doing Dr. Stone, What's the Difference, on that week as well. So that'll be a busy week after next week. But yeah, no chapter next week, so that's why we're doing it now. But for now, let's just get right into the review. Alright, so this will be chapter 147, titled Accumulated Hatred. Obviously, this is a reference to the fact that Giren was actually betrayed by the other royal families, and this is actually going to be explained. As I said earlier, it's going to be explained how he was betrayed and exactly what for, and what caused him to actually be in the state that he was until he got his form back at the end of the last chapter. Now, it's sort of similar to how I sort of like kind of got an idea of. But it's quite different, quite different from what's actually being implied in the chapter itself. But anyway, continuing on from the end of the last chapter, if you remember that Giren's forces actually killed Poonpoon, Lord Poonpoon, so he's actually dead and out of it, and we have Lord Bayon, who's actually I believe he's holding either Poonpoon's mask or the mask of his wife, because I believe his wife was actually killed in the last chapter as well. I could be wrong in that regard, but it seems like that was the case, and he's looking at it, and we get the caption, "The curse from 700 years ago brings back despair." As we see a flashback of Bayon's family, and one of his kids going, Mother, Lord Giren is beautiful and just. And we see Bayon actually fall into the ground in obvious despair about what Giren's actually become. I believe this is what's actually being implied here, that we have a younger Bayon actually looking at the mask and thinking at... No, it's actually... No, it's actually Bayon's mother, who was actually the one that was killed. From what's implied... Oh, no. From what's implying here, from what I can see, it's actually, it's still his wife, and it's actually his daughter who's saying, Mother, Lord Giren is beautiful. And just we see, like, Bayon just actually in despair for what's actually happened. I believe that it was his wife that was actually killed at the end of the last chapter. I could be wrong, and hopefully someone will leave a comment to actually correct me on that, but I believe that's actually the case, because otherwise, why would Bayon actually be in despair now? No. Wait, let's look here. Let's look. Oh no! It's actually his family. It's actually all of Bayon's family was. I believe it was actually killed at the end of the last chapter, because one part actually has Bayon actually holding two masks whilst he was holding the mask of his wife there. So yeah, you can understand why the despair is in, and what's actually about to transpire here, right now. We get the title page as Bayon goes, Giren, you bastard! As we see him just actually charge towards Giren with the intent to actually kill him for what actually transpired, because all of this was just actually so sudden, and they just burst in and just started killing everyone around them in an attempt to regain the form that they have. And obviously Giren has actually regained his form now, as we see Bayon just actually charge up to him, and we see Nomu's actually staring down Giren as well, obviously intending to kill him or to fight him to the death. And it's actually pretty amazing of this series how we actually get sort of like not only grey areas between like who's the villain on the demon side and who's the villain on the human side, but also within those ranks as well we actually get sort of like grey areas within the demon culture itself, in the same way that we get the grey areas within the human culture as well. And I really love how we have these two neat parallels of maybe humans and demons aren't as different as we were initially led to believe at the beginning of the series. Because at the beginning of the series, it was very apparent to us like who the bad guys were. It was obviously the demons, and the humans had to fight against them. But now it's like we can't really tell. It's just like that. All that grey area and all that corruption and all that betrayal and backstabbing that's going on between not just the humans but the demons. And it's really fascinating how the authors have actually portrayed this throughout the series, even though there have been a few little ups and downs throughout it, like just the fact that they've actually made the demons much more complex than they were originally set out to be, in the same way that they made the humans much more complex than they were initially set out to be. And it's just like these two opposite sides of the same coin between the human race and the demon race. We cut to 700 years ago, and this is what I love about the series, how we just get these flashbacks. Like, these flashbacks are amazing. Like, every flashback that we've had throughout the series has just been amazing about how they've actually structured it. And okay, so now we're getting a demon flashback, which is something that I've wanted more of ever since the series started. And we get a flashback from 700 years ago when Giren was actually a lord, part of the 5 regnant houses. He was one of the lords before he was actually backstabbed by his own kind. And we see them, and we see him in a conference with the queen and all the other demon, like the demon. The royals of the demon family, sort of like a House of Parliament, but their version of the House of Parliament, but demon style. So we have like them in a conference, and we have the queen front and center, and we have Giren actually explaining the situation of what's actually going on in the world around him, as the queen goes on to say, "Speak," and we get the caption, "Queen Reginald," I can never pronounce her name. I'm never going to be able to pronounce her name. So basically, Demon Queen, she says, "Speak" to Giren, and he goes, "Yes, in recent years, the lower grade farms haven't been able to keep with produce demands. In many places, all the people can do is go hungry." And obviously, as we've established, like if the demons don't continuously consume human meat, then they're just going to regress into wild demons, like just basically minus animals. So this is actually really interesting point that he's actually bringing up here. I mean, obviously, it's human meat that they're actually producing, but in terms of actually him bringing up this, he's raising perfectly valid points here. It's like, okay, we're not being able to keep up with the produce demands, and we can go hungry, and then we can turn into wild demons, and we don't want that. So there has to be a solution to what's going to go down here. And obviously, and Giren goes on to say, "At this rate, many of our people will meet their end." Obviously, talking about his clan, the Giren clan, and how if they stop consuming human meat, they're just gonna regress back into their wild nature, as it's been established how that's the structure of how the demons in this world function. It's like they've got to keep eating the same produce again and again and again in order to maintain their form of rights. They regress to wild animals. And he goes on to say, "Let's open up the national treasury of the nobility and give our portion." And that's actually not a bad solution to it, as we get the caption, the 5 regional houses at the time, Lord Giren. And that's actually not a bad solution to it. It's like, okay, we've got all these mass-produced produce out here, so maybe if we give a small portion out, to just a tiny little portion, then it might be enough to sustain us until we can get our produce back up and running to the standards that we actually have to maintain in order for us to survive. And that is actually a really valid solution to the whole thing. But of course, the other demons are not going to have any of that. As Giren gives his solution to the whole situation and the whole problem, all the other demons are just like in like shock at like the fact, like, give up our potions? What are you saying? Like, what? Give up our potions to help you out? As one as the Lord Numerous, of the time. Maybe it's like related to, or it's maybe the same Noma as we saw in Goldie Pond, in the same way that I'm pretty sure that this is the Lord Bayon. I'm pretty sure that this is Lord Bayon that was at Goldie Pond with Lewis as well. They go on to say, "You're saying to give up our portion to the lower classes. That's dangerous. Don't you know the meats we eat and the meats those commoners eat are on a different level?" Okay, so this is actually a really interesting point here, because it's like not only establishing the view of how the royal families view the common folk, but also how the meat they produce. It's sort of like, we're of a higher class here. We eat this higher class meat, premier goods, specifically for us. Can you imagine if the common folk ever got to eat our meats? The common folk, they're on a different level, and you're saying we should give our produce to them, like just being like just this pompous, egotistical nature here. And again, like I said, this is establishing how the demons are not so different from humankind as well, because there are humans out there who'll be like, ridiculous, give up my portion to the common folk, preposterous. As Lord Bayon goes on to say, but depending on the degree, if only we could give a portion, as Lord Poo-Poo's clan goes, that's no good, I say. But well, wouldn't that mean that our shares would all be cut? And again, it's very good rebuttals to what Giren's actually saying here, which of course he probably knew that this was probably gonna happen, and he probably has rebuttals to them as well. But no, I love the Lord Numerous, how it's just like, ridiculous, give our portions out to the common folk, ridiculous. That's what I just love about it, how they can just make these demons seem much more human than some humans can be in not just this series, but in any other series that you actually read, how they actually have much more humanity and personality in them than some humans do have. A good example is Andrew, how he was just how eventually he started off with very much promise, but in the end he turned into like a stereotypical antagonist, which not bad. Well, it's all right to have those stereotypical antagonists. For something like The Promised Neverland, you're expecting something a whole lot better, and Andrew was just like this cardboard cow, just like follow everything to there, don't listen to any reason type thing. And well, like I said, well, that's not bad in some situations, but for The Promised Neverland, it needs to be building from previous villains, and unfortunately Andrew just didn't do that in the end. As Lord Poo-Poo gives his suggestion out of like, wouldn't that mean that our shares would be cut? Lord Giren just bangs his hands on the table and is like, how could you say such a thing in this situation? The people will transform into wild demons. People in the same villages, parents and children, will be eating each other. I wonder how far this hellish gene has already spread, just how many villages have already been destroyed. And that's what I love about Giren, that he's raising perfectly valid points here, in the fact that as a society, they need to survive and they need to strive, and it's not just them, it's the common folk as well. And to have the common folk just turn into wild animals, start slaughtering each other, then there's no reason for them to keep producing and flourishing, and therefore they'll just become a extinct race in the end. So again, Lord Giren, that's what I love about it, is like all he's trying to do is just save the people. He's just trying to save the common folk and save and do whatever he can to survive, not just himself but also his clan and the common folk, and prevent them from becoming wild demons, and just basically having a mass slaughter or cannibalistic slaughter of their kind. He goes on to continue making his points and saying, rules are meant to govern for their people. If we don't protect our people, we won't prosper. Like I said, like that's actually a very valid point here that they have to take into consideration, because it's like, what's the point of them having rules, or what's the point of them being in charge if they've got no one to rule over, if they actually are just like, we're not going to give our produce to the common folk because they're on a different level. And it's like, okay, well, what happens if they do turn into wild animals? What then? They're just going to kill each other, and then we won't have any subjects to rule over, or not anyone to actually look after the farms. This is going to actually be coming up in a bit of them actually just recently at this point just even though it has been a really long time at this point, 700 years, that's kind of like only about a quarter of the time that they or like a third of the time that they've had to produce these frogs. So it's still in relatively new stages of what they've actually done, and it's really, and to them it's a new concept of the fact that they've allied with the humans at this point, even though it's 700 years ago. Even though at this point it's been 300 years since the demons made the alliance with the or the truce with the humans. The fact that they're still in the development stages of this produce before it can actually really flourish, like as we've seen in the current storyline, and the fact that he is actually bringing up these points is actually something that they really need to take into consideration. Like I said, if they've got no subjects to rule, what's the point of them even living, or what's the point of even having a royal family? As he goes on to say, if we don't take any measures, all of us will meet our demise. And that is actually a good point. Like, if they don't take any measures and then the common folk just turn into wild animals, what's stopping them from barging into the royal capital and just slaughtering them there and then? As he goes on to say, for our sake and our nation's sake, I can say with confidence that us nobles should give a bit in order to save them. And again, that is actually a legitimate argument to be made here. Like, their royal family, they could just give them some produce because it's all going to shit at this moment in time. And what happens if they turn to animals? Like I said, what's to stop them from barging into the royal capital and them all being dead meat? Then there's nothing to rule over, and it's basically the humans could just take over the world, take over the entire world, and we just become a dying race. As everyone ponders over what Giren's actually said and whether or not it's actually a suitable solution, we see Duke Iverk's. Okay, this is probably the demon that at the end of last chapter, when he was opening the door and he got his face slashed in and killed. I think this is actually the same demon from the end of that last chapter, like the one that I couldn't remember his name. Okay, so it's Duke Iverk. As he goes on to say, let's calm down, Lord Giren. I understand what you're saying, but everyone's concerns are justified. And yeah, they have to like take everyone's points into consideration because it's still a conference that they're actually holding, like a meeting, sort of like Parliament. They have to take everyone's concerns into consideration here. Like Giren may have the point of like, okay, we've got to help the common folk here, but the others still they still value their goods, and it's still their goods, and whether or not they be willing to share it out, that's really up to them at the end of the day. As they continue on and say, I believe that the problem with the farms currently is how they are being maintained. If in these peaceful times the farm's produce can't keep up with the growing population and their demands. Okay, so it's kind of like sort of like what happened in the MCU. That's pretty much how I saw this here. It's like, okay, so this is gonna be basically doing what Thanos did in Infinity War. Like, he saw how mass the population of the universe is gonna be. So it's like, okay, we're just gonna wipe out half of it, and then it will be able to flourish then. And this is made even more empowered by what the Queen actually says in a later panel. But continuing on, he goes on. Ivan goes on to say, now that we've joined hands with humans, mass produce of low-grade meats is being worked on. The state of the plantations is still under review. Okay, so like I said, like they're not really at the stage as they are right now in the story, and it's still in new development stages. But it's getting there. But Giren's point is that the fact that they need it right now, otherwise it's going to be no point in having these mass-produced farms. But as we are well aware, something happens, and yeah, it's not pretty in the slightest. Ivan goes on to say that they should wait first, and then they may act according to the results of what happens when the plantations actually do get up and running. As the Queen orders that the matter is over with and dissolves the meeting, and we see Giren just like, damn it, as he's back in his office, looking through some paperwork and going and pondering over various thoughts that he has in his head. As he goes on to say, why don't they understand the crisis we're in? All they can think about is their profit. All the while, everyone on the other side is suffering. And again, that's what I love about Giren. It's like he's trying to just be like what the royal nobles must be. It's sort of like how Doflamingo's father acted in One Piece, how he wanted to just be how he wanted to just experience what the common folk was like, but that didn't really work out for him. But similar here, it's like Giren's actually concerned about the common folk and about the fact that if they all die, we've got no one to rule over, and then what's the point of us even existing in the first place? As he goes on to say, to think to himself and say, "Nah, they aren't even trying to understand. How many times have we tried mass producing no grain meat to begin with? Our inability to do that is the reason for this famine." Okay, so this is very interesting in the sense that when they first allied with the humans, it seems like they actually did have the idea of producing the farms, but it didn't exactly work out in the beginning, and it just led to just produce. It just led to them just like going through a famine, trying to actually get some decent human meat in them to actually maintain their form, and whether they've dwindled down to a small population at 700 years ago, that's a different story entirely. But it's fascinating to think that the mass producing farm didn't exactly work out to begin with, and I'm really amazed that they actually brought something about that up, because for it to be because again, that actually makes a lot of sense, because it was a new idea for these demons, and they'd never done anything like this before. When they first set it up, the actual idea of like, okay, we're going to produce these farms, we're going to produce humans in these farms, and see where it can end up. And the fact that he actually failed several times, it doesn't exactly state how many times it did, but from looking at this, it's like it's something that's been there since the beginning, but it's just never seemed to have taken off. Sort of like how Brexit is happening right now. I know, I just wanted to bring up Brexit, because that's actually pissing me off. It's like, they brought in this idea of, like, leaving the European Union, and nothing is happening with it. A lot is happening with it, but it just seems like it's not going anywhere. That seems like the frustration that Giren's having here. It's like, okay, we've got these mass-produced farms, but they're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything with them, so what's the point of even having them? And anyway, we go on to see... we go on to see Dozer, although he's not a Lord Dozer, he's General Dozer. And you go Fassel to the Giren clan, General Dozer, as he goes on to say, "You're looking as elegant as ever, Lord Giren," and of course you can figure out what's going to happen with the fact that he's General Dozer. Yeah, you can probably figure it out. It's made plain as day, the fact that he's General Dozer here, but he's Lord Dozer in the current storyline. Dozer goes on to say that to be the most noble out of the 5 regnant lords, possessing so much knowledge and wealth, and to go so far as to share all of that with your citizens without hesitation, there's no ruler so loved by his citizens and vassals alike. For your territory to be the one most affected by this disastrous famine, and Giren goes on, and I can't do anything to save it. And again, he's probably at his wit's end here of the fact that he has solutions, but it's just like he's not getting the approval that he so desperately needs to actually save his people, and to actually have someone for them to look up to, but also for someone to, for them to say, "Oh yeah, that's our leader. We must bow to him wherever he comes in." And it's probably the fact that some of his family have actually just turned back into wild animals, and actually had to kill them at some point because of the famine, because of the lack of meat and the lack of produce to maintain their forms. And it's probably got to a point with his clan to say, like, okay, this is a problem. We need to sort this. We need to sort this out here and now. Dozer goes on to say, "But even so, you must not give up. The seeds that you've sown were a friendly spell, and you'll save everyone." Yeah, that is BS if I've ever heard it. And Giren, with the look that he has on his face, and actually I want to talk about his design. I really like his design for the fact that the long flowing hair, which I assume is going to be blonde when it's animated, and the 2 horns, and just the fact that the mask has sort of like a compass area to him, so it's I assume that it's either a compass or it's supposed to be like a star, so it's like a shining star for the citizens to actually worship and appreciate. I feel like that's probably the design that they're going through with Giren's mask here. But anyway, continuing on, Dorsa goes on to say, your righteousness will surely bring forth. I will also support you wherever you go. Yeah, he's clearly talking out of his ass here. As Giren goes on to say, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, when someone is talking like that, you know that they've got something, that they've got some hidden agenda that's going to be sprouting out at any moment. After hearing Dorsa's words, Giren says that he has a request for him as he takes off on a horse, or like a demon-style horse, the same one that Songju was actually riding on when he saved Rei. He goes on to say, Giren goes on to say, I've heard a certain rumour from a merchant in my territory. As we see an image of Musica just walking around, and he goes on to, I want you to check it out. If their power is real, we can do something for our people, and it might be useful for the future of the farms. Okay, so I feel like what Giren actually wants is just like Musica's blood to actually make sure that, okay, we get it injected in them, then we don't have to regress, and we can just stay our form, whilst also we find a solution to the whole issue with the farm and everything like that. And again, that's probably the only other option that he has at this point, because he's not going to get the approval of the royal family to give out the Porsches or anything, and he's at his wit's end. So it's like, this is my last opportunity, and I've got nothing else. So what else can I lose? Well, what else can you lose is your title, and basically your humanity, in the same, as best as I can say for a demon. As we cut over to see Giren going, Dorsa, as we see him just being tied up, and him going, and Dorsa going, I told them about this. It's quite disastrous that the wealthiest and most powerful Giren clan betrayed us, which of course he is talking out of his ass here. It's like, he's not betraying them, and he's obviously just made up this story to like get Giren out of the way, because I feel like he's like, okay, so if we can get Giren out of the way, then maybe we don't have to worry about little insects like him bugging into our plans of the five royal regiment houses. Or maybe he's had this plan for a while, to like actually just backstab Giren and actually be like, I'm going to take his place as the Lord and just banish him to the wastelands. As Giren gets mad at Dorsa, he goes on to say, I'm grateful, now I can capitalise on this chance. One's value should be estimated entirely by duty, not by status, honestly. I'm glad you're such an idiot. Okay, so basically from what I'm hearing here is that, okay, Dorsa had Giren had an idea of where Musica was, and was like, okay, I'm gonna let you go and find this person, and maybe if it can get her blood, maybe we can actually save our race and actually get the farms up and running. And I feel like what's happening is that Dorsa is actually taking the credit for coming up with this, and actually saying like, okay, so now that I have this, it's like, I'm just going to backstab him. I'm just going to say he's causing treason here. He's causing treason here for some reason, even though it's plainly obvious that a lot of them know that Dorsa is actually just talking out of his arse here, and just being really pompous and being really egotistical here, like how it was with his son, how it was with the Luch guy, and we all know how well that turned out for him. But anyway, continuing on, he got our voice goes, somebody call for Duke Ivek, my clan, and this is Giren actually saying, somebody call for Duke Ivek, my clan and I were innocent. And Ivek goes, I know that, which obviously confuses Giren to some degree. It's like, what, if you know we're innocent, why am I in here? As Ivek goes on to explain, you aren't plotting any treason. Your loyalty is as true as any. Everything was slander and drivel from Dawson. So obviously they didn't buy Dawson's story in the slightest, but yet they still chose to like take his word and just actually get rid of Giren, as Giren asks the $1 million question. But then why would you do this? If you know I'm innocent, why are you doing this to me? As Ivor goes, you're in the way. Your righteousness and justice are. I appreciate your loyalty, but you're a nuisance. Okay. So from what I'm getting at here is like, okay, you may be right and you may have a point here, but we don't need people like you. We basically gonna do things our way. We have no respect for the common folk. I feel like that's what they're actually getting here. The royal families, they don't give a crap about the common folk, as long as they are able to maintain their form and able to maintain rule and order in the rule. They don't care. They don't care what happens to the common folk, and they could just become wild animals for all they care. Demons that are outside of the royal capital and all of that. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how we have this here. How we have like just this backstabbing and just this conspiracy within the royal families. And again, like I said, it's something that's similar to what happened to our history, how we had just like royal families just like backstabbing each other and just killing each other off to in order to maintain rule and order and see which side dominates over one another. Again, showing that the demons and the humans, they're not that much more different from each other as we would like to believe at the beginning of the series. Continuing on, we get a flashback within the flashback of the Queen going, "What's the problem? There are too many. If we let people die, then everyone can have enough human meat. That is Her Majesty's kindness." As Giren goes on to say, "What? She's rotten." And again, this is what I was referring to, the fact of the idea of this is similar to what Thanos' plan was in Infinity War, how he saw that the population of the universe was getting too mass and too full of life, that there wasn't enough food to go around. So he was like, okay, so if I kill half the population of the universe, then maybe the other half that's actually survived will have enough to maintain and actually survive without the universe like collapsing in on itself, based on the fact that there's too many mouths, not enough food to go around, as he gently put it. And this is similar to what's actually going on here, just on a much more terrifying scale, because of the fact that not only is she like sacrificing members of her own race, but the fact that she's going to basically turn them into monsters, and that gets Gillian going, "What? She's rotten." And I think this is actually the moment where it's like, I don't care, like, I am going to get my revenge one day. I'm going to get out of this situation, I'm going to get my revenge one day, and I am going to come back and kill every single one of you for what you've done to me, for what you've basically betrayed, not just me, but also a lot of the common folk and a lot of generations that are going to come in the next 700 years, based on where we are right now in the story. They go on to say, and it's not just Her Majesty, everyone is rotten. Your cleanliness is an eyesore. Dorsa's corrupt nature was just right for us to move on from that. And what we see here is like actually a lot of brains actually being put into jars. We see like a brain on a table, which I'm gonna assume is Giren's, and we see a brain in a bowl that Bayon's actually holding. So this is actually something that actually happened at the end of the last chapter. If you actually remember how Giren actually killed Poo Poo and actually went into like his and just like actually absorbed something from it. So like what I assume what happened here is that they removed the brain of Giren and his clan, and put them in regular demons to give them not just a substance for themselves, but also to flourish themselves and become much more intelligent. At least that's the idea of what I'm getting at here. And Giren obviously killed Poo Poo and took his brain back, and obviously regained his form back as how he is right now in the story, as we see Giren actually transform into the ferocious beast that he is before he actually got his brain back. So that's basically what I feel like happened here, is that they took the brains out and they became the mindless monsters or basically, well, not mindless, just like wild beasts, but they still had a level of intelligence that they didn't actually need their brains. That's basically what I'm getting at here, as we cut back to the present day, as we see Bayon and Noma actually charging at Giren. And then we cut back to him going, "My clan, they're dead. The vassals that I lost to, everyone was irreplaceable. How could we have spent 700 years like that?" As we see like just his clan just basically as wild animals, just basically dying or already dead, and him just looking over them and thinking like, why did my family have to be like this? We didn't do anything wrong. It was them, and yeah, we've ended up like this. And you can actually see him just like being like there, like just like, we're gonna get it one day. We're gonna get our payback one day. As we call it again, back to the present day storyline, as we see Bayon and Norman said, like just basically from what happened. From what I can see here, it's just like, okay, they were charging at Giren, and he just went with his claws, just like, and just basically shredded their heads from their spines, and just basically pulled them off, killed them immediately right there with no fucks given. So it's just like charging at him, or it could be the fact that he just went like just used like the speed ability that not only Songju has demonstrated, but also Lufus has as well. It's just like they were rushing him and he just went like that, just like that with his claw, with his hands, like just he basically killed them with his bare hands, like just without any flying fucks given. As he goes on to say, "Bayon brat." And the little Noma go, if you want to resist somebody, you should resent. If you want to resent somebody, you should resent your own parents. As we see Doza going, oh shit! Like he gives the oh shit look, and like we're fucked. And sure enough, one of I don't know if it's Bayon himself. Yeah, I don't know if it's Bayon himself, but it's basically one of his close comrades. Just shreds Dorsa's head off completely without any fucks given. Like before he can even react, like Dorsa's getting all of this at a moment, getting all of this information like within like the span of a few seconds. Like he sees Noma and Bayon get killed in front of him. He's like, oh shit, and then just like his head's all off, and that's the end of his life right there and then. As Dorsa is being killed, one of the demons, basically the one that actually killed him, but it's not Giren, it's actually one of his comrades, actually says to him, don't get a big head. Best comeback ever to someone that's actually backstabbed you. As he goes on to say, the first thing you should have said was sorry, Dorsa. As we see the caption saying, a dance of death and hatred heading towards its finale. Okay, so this caption, it may actually be referring to the finale of the battle. It may not actually be. That's up for debate of what actually that means. But anyway, concluding the chapter, we cut over to Cecilo, Barbara, Sassy, and Norman as the like only two more. All right, move in. And that's where the chapter ends. So overall, it was a better chapter than the last one. It established a lot of things, and actually how Giren came to be the way it was, and it actually gave us a sense of like just how strong he actually is when he was able to kill basically 3 out of the 5 regional, basically leaders of the regional houses. So he was able to kill Dorsa, or it possibly 4 if we include Ivek, if that really was Ivek that died at the end of the last chapter. But he was able to kill, he was able to confirm that his clan was able to kill 3 out of the 5 Reginate House leaders, and just shows how much of a threat he would actually be if he was actually going to turn on Norman. And maybe he actually doesn't, and I'm pretty sure Norman has no idea of the fact that Giren has actually changed his form, and it's possible that he may actually have to retreat if he wants to actually survive this, or he might actually lose some of his columns. Like he might actually lose Sassy, and he might actually lose Barbara and Cecilo in this process, and be like, oh shit, I never should have made an alliance with this guy because of how threatening and how strong he is. And then just by the fact that he was able to just kill Bayon and Noma just like that without any fucks given, and then Dorsa survived a little bit longer only to meet his end as well. But anyway guys, what did you think of this chapter? Let me know, like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and let me know where you think it's actually going to go here. If you think Norman is actually going to fight Giren, or you think Giren's actually going to escape and actually start a war against Norman, and whether and where Emma and Don and Gilda and all the rest fit into this, that's another story. But let me know. Again, like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz, and this will be Lasher Luke signing off. Later, guys!